Hello and welcome to Synthetic History, where the past speaks again, but not through dusty archives or faded manuscripts. Here, we use generative AI tools to resurrect history's lost stories, forgotten places, silenced voices, and the echoes of time itself. This isn't just storytelling, it's a collaboration between human researchers and AI agents, weaving together historical fact and imagination with precision. Every episode is a bridge between what was and what could be remembered. And now, let's begin. Here's our new episode. What happens when faith is tested, not in private, but in the public square? When standing for truth comes at a cost, and silence feels safer? In Nazi Germany, churches faced a choice: speak out or stay silent. Resist or conform. Some stood courageously against injustice, risking prison and death. Others reshaped faith to fit ideology, aligning themselves with Hitler's vision. Most simply looked away. But history has a way of repeating itself. When power demands allegiance over truth, when compromise feels more convenient than conviction, we must ask ourselves, what would we have done? And what will we do now? This season on Synthetic History, we explore the stories of ordinary people, pastors, factory workers, students, who wrestled with faith, fear, and the choices that shaped a generation. While some figures are fictional, their struggles are deeply rooted in historical reality, drawing from in-depth research by AI agents and human co-authors. Join us as we uncover the moral dilemmas of the past, dilemmas that still echo today.
Episode 5. The Teenage Girl in the Hitler Youth. Berlin, September 1933. Lotte Wagner adjusted her Hitler Youth uniform, smoothing out the navy blue skirt. The bright red armband with the black swastika stood out against her white blouse. She carefully adjusted her black neckerchief with its leather knot, making sure it sat perfectly against her collar. Since the Nazi coordination of all youth organizations earlier that year, the Bund Deutscher Mädel uniform had become a symbol of prestige among her peers. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had waited weeks for this moment. Tonight, in front of her instructors, she would recite her loyalty oath to Adolf Hitler. It was the final step to officially joining the League of German Girls, Bund Deutscher Mädel, the female division of the Hitler Youth. Though membership wasn't yet mandatory, it soon would be. Already, the pressure to join was immense. At school, teachers favored the girls who wore the uniform. In the streets, those without the armband were sometimes mocked or excluded. She was proud, excited. All across Germany, girls her age were joining, drawn by the hiking trips, the sports competitions, the sense of purpose. The League of German Girls promised to make them part of Germany's glorious future. In her meetings so far, they'd sung folk songs, learned about racial hygiene, and practiced gymnastics, all to prepare them to be the perfect German women, future mothers of a 1,000-year Reich. But somewhere, deep in the back of her mind, a whisper of doubt stirred. Last week, her BDM leader had given a lecture about racial enemies that had made her uncomfortable. When she'd raised her hand to ask about her Jewish classmate Rebecca, who was certainly not an enemy, the room had fallen silent. The leader had simply said, "There are no exceptions." She shoved it down. Her parents didn't approve of the Hitler Youth, but they had stopped arguing when they saw how determined she was. Her father, especially, had grown increasingly worried as more and more of his fellow teachers were dismissed for insufficient enthusiasm for the new curriculum. "Just don't get too involved," her mother had said. Be careful, Lotte. Remember what Pastor Klein taught us before they replaced him. Her father had been less careful with his words. This is not Germany, he muttered. Not the Germany I grew up in. They're turning children against parents, students against teachers. But what did he know? He was a relic of the past. He still talked about the Weimar Republic with fondness, despite the hyperinflation and humiliation Germany had suffered. Germany was strong again, united, powerful. The radio and newspapers constantly reminded them that unemployment was dropping dramatically, that Germany was rebuilding its military despite the Versailles restrictions, that Jews and communists were being dealt with. She would be part of its future. The Hitler Youth already had over 2 million members. Soon, it would be the only path for young Germans. Or so she thought. The oath. The ceremony was held in the courtyard of her school, just as the sun set. The yard had been transformed in recent months. A large Nazi flag now dominated the entrance, and portraits of Hitler had replaced the old academic paintings in the halls. A bust of the Führer stood where a statue of Goethe had once been. A row of girls stood in formation, their arms raised in salute. Behind them, a brass band played martial music that echoed off the stone walls of the schoolyard. Parents stood at a distance, some watching with solemn expressions, others with pride. A few, like Lotte's mother, held their hands tightly together, as if to keep themselves from speaking. The instructor, Frau Köhler, paced in front of them, her sharp eyes scanning their faces. She had been a physical education teacher before, but her rapid advancement in the Nazi Teachers League had elevated her to a leadership position. She wore her party pin prominently on her lapel. "Today you pledge yourselves to something greater than yourselves," she declared. "To Germany, to its people, to its leader. The German girl must be loyal, pure in racial stock, and prepared to fulfill her biological destiny for the fatherland." Lotte lifted her chin. She had been taught that her highest calling was to become a mother of racially pure children. The BDM meetings emphasized that academic pursuits were secondary to physical fitness and domestic skills for girls. The moment had come. "Repeat after me," Frau Köhler commanded. The girls spoke in unison. "I promise, in the Hitler Youth, to do my duty at all times with love and loyalty to the Führer and our flag." Lotte's throat went dry. She tried to say the words. She had practiced them 100 times in front of her mirror at home. But now, her voice wouldn't come. Something about the absolute nature of the oath struck her. What did it mean to pledge unconditional loyalty to a man? Hadn't Pastor Klein taught them that their ultimate loyalty should be to God? Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She stared at the instructor, her chest tight. The other girls moved on without her, finishing the oath, their voices crisp, unwavering. Many seemed genuinely enthusiastic, especially those whose parents were party members. They had been taught that Hitler was almost a messianic figure, Germany's savior. Frau Köhler's gaze snapped to Lotte. "Is something wrong, Fräulein Wagner?" Lotte's hands clenched at her sides. She knew that any hesitation would be noted. Girls who showed insufficient enthusiasm were often assigned additional ideological training or reported to their parents. She swallowed hard. "No, Frau Köhler," she said quickly. I just lost my place." The instructor studied her. Since the civil service law had been passed in April, teachers were required to demonstrate loyalty to the regime or lose their positions. Frau Köhler had to prove her own ideological reliability by identifying any students with questionable attitudes. Then, after a long pause, She nodded. See that it does not happen again. Perfect loyalty requires perfect attention. Lotte exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. The moment passed, but something inside her had shifted. Was this what it meant to be German now? To pledge absolute loyalty to a man, rather than to principles or to God? And it would only grow. The family secret. That night at dinner, Lotte sat across from her parents in silence. Their small apartment was modestly furnished, with bookshelves lining one wall. Her father had already hidden certain volumes behind others. Books by Jewish authors, pacifist literature, and theological works that contradicted Nazi ideology. Her father, Ernst Wagner, was a schoolteacher. He had always been a man of discipline, of rules. Before Hitler, he had taught his students to think critically, to question, to evaluate evidence. Now, he was required to teach from standardized materials that emphasized racial ideology and German supremacy. But lately, he had grown quiet. The teacher's lounge at his school had become a dangerous place for conversation. Several of his colleagues had already been dismissed or transferred after being reported for defeatist statements, especially about the Reich. How was the ceremony? Her mother asked. She worked as a nurse at a local hospital, where she had recently been required to attend lectures on racial hygiene and the burden that the disabled and mentally ill placed on society. Fine, Lotte said quickly. She fingered the new membership card in her pocket, proof that she was now officially part of the system. Her father said nothing, but Lotte saw the way his fingers tightened around his fork. Her mother sighed. Lotte, you know your father and I don't. You don't understand, Lotte cut in, her voice sharp. It's different now. Everyone at school is joining. Julia's father got promoted in the civil service because she's in the BDM. Her father set down his fork. You think we are blind, he said, that we do not see what is happening, that we don't understand why children are being taught to spy on their parents, to report disloyal remarks. Lotte frowned. Germany is stronger than ever. The Führer has given people jobs, restored our pride. She was repeating phrases she had heard countless times in her BDM meetings and in school. Her father nodded slowly. Yes, Lotte. And at what cost? Have you noticed there are no more Jewish children in your school? Have you wondered where your friend Rebecca went? Or why Pastor Klein was suddenly replaced by someone who preaches about Germany more than Christ? She opened her mouth to argue, but then he stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled out a small leather-bound journal hidden behind several textbooks. In recent months, possessing such a document had become increasingly dangerous. The Gestapo, established in April, was already conducting searches and arrests based on anonymous tips. He placed it in front of her. Read, he said. This is what your stronger Germany looks like from another perspective. Lotte hesitated. Then she flipped it open. Her blood turned to ice. It was filled with names, meticulously documented, with dates and details. The names of teachers, pastors, neighbors, people who had spoken against the Reich, people who had disappeared from daily life, whose absence was never explained. And next to some of them, a single word. Arrested. She turned the page. Another name. Another name. Another name. Professor Heinemann, dismissed for refusing to teach racial science. Herr Goldstein, shop closed, family relocated. Frau Schmidt, arrested for defeatist remarks after asking about her missing son. Then, her own pastor's name, Pastor Helmut Klein. Next to it, replaced. Refused to remove Jewish elements from worship. current whereabouts unknown. Pastor Klein, who had baptized her, who had taught her confirmation classes, who had always ended his sermons by reminding them that all people were children of God. Her hands trembled. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "If they found this..." The implications were clear. Keeping such records was considered an act of treason. Her father sat down. "We write them down because we cannot say them aloud," he said. "The ones who disappear, the ones no one asks about, the ones the newspapers never mention. Your mother and I, we are part of a small group. We share information, we remember, we pray." Lotte felt like she couldn't breathe. The Reich never talked about these people. In her Hitler Youth meetings, she was taught that anyone who opposed the new Germany was a traitor, an enemy of the people. Those who disappeared had deserved their fate. She had always assumed they had simply left, gone to other cities, other countries. Now, she wasn't so sure. And the BDM oath she had just taken. What did it mean in light of these disappearances? "They're building camps," her father said quietly. "Places where they send people who speak against the regime." Dachau was just the beginning. A test of loyalty. The next morning, at school, Lotte was called to the headmaster's office. The school building itself had changed. Nazi symbols adorned the walls, and a portrait of Hitler hung above the blackboard in every classroom. When she stepped inside, Frau Köhler was waiting for her. The instructor had been given authority beyond her teaching role. She now monitored political reliability among both teachers and students. Beside her sat a young SS officer. The SS had been rapidly gaining power since the night of the long knives was still months away, but already they inspired fear. Lotte's stomach dropped. She'd heard stories of students being questioned about their parents' private conversations. "Fräulein Wagner," Frau Köhler said, her voice smooth, "we have a small matter to discuss." Lotte nodded stiffly. She felt the weight of her father's journal in her memory, the names of the disappeared pressing on her conscience. "You are a good student," Frau Köhler continued, "a promising member of the League of German Girls. Your physical fitness scores are excellent, and you've demonstrated aptitude in domestic skills training." Lotte forced a smile. The BDM emphasized physical development and domestic training over academic achievement for girls. Their slogan, "Be faithful, be pure, be German," made their priorities clear. "Thank you, Frau Köhler." The instructor leaned forward. "Then I am sure you will not hesitate to answer a simple question. The Führer needs young people he can trust absolutely, especially as we cleanse our institutions of unhealthy influences." Lotte's pulse pounded in her ears. She knew the Hitler Youth organization was designed partly to separate children from potentially subversive parental influences. Young people were encouraged to see themselves as Hitler's children first, their parents' children second. "Your father is a schoolteacher, yes?" Lotte nodded. Her father had been teaching for 15 years. He still used old textbooks when he could, avoiding the new racial science materials whenever possible. "We have reason to believe he is less than enthusiastic about our nation's new leadership. The new curriculum requires complete commitment to National Socialist principles, yet your father seems reluctant to fully embrace these teachings." The room tilted slightly. She remembered the names in her father's journal, the fates of those who had been reported. "Surely you would know if your father held up unpatriotic views," Frau Köhler continued. "Have you ever heard him say anything against the Führer? Does he speak negatively about our policies when he's at home? Does he maintain contact with Jewish acquaintances?" Lotte's heart stopped. she was being asked to inform on her own father, exactly as the Nazi youth organizations were designed to encourage. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. We write them down because we cannot say them aloud. If she said yes, he would be reported. He might disappear like Pastor Klein, like the others in his journal. If she said no, and they found proof, she would be punished too. Children who failed to report disloyal parents could themselves be removed from their homes and placed with politically reliable families. The SS officer watched her carefully. His presence made it clear this was not merely a school matter, but a state security concern. Lotte swallowed hard. Then she forced a smile. Her BDM training had taught her discipline, had taught her to project confidence even when uncertain. Of course not, Frau Köhler, she said, her voice even. My father is loyal to Germany, as am I. He teaches the new curriculum with enthusiasm. Just last week, he conducted a special lesson on racial science. The lie came easily, but its weight was crushing. She held the officer's gaze. She had learned from BDM physical training to show no weakness, to endure discomfort without complaint, unblinking. He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. Very good, Fräulein Wagner. Remember, your first loyalty is to the Führer and the fatherland. The new Germany depends on young people like you, not on the old generation with their outdated ideas. If you ever hear anything concerning, you know where to report it. Lotte walked out of the office. Her legs felt like lead. Throughout the building, other students were watching her, wondering what she had been asked, what she had said. She had lied, to protect her father, to protect herself. But now she knew. This world, the one she had been so eager to join, was not what she thought it was. The BDM uniform that had made her feel proud now felt like a costume, a disguise. And for the first time, she was terrified, not just for herself, but for her parents, for Pastor Klein, for Rebecca, who had disappeared from class, for all the names in her father's journal. As she walked back to class, she passed the school chapel, which had been converted into a hall of honor for Hitler. The cross had been removed, replaced by a swastika banner. And she wondered, in choosing between the oath she had taken yesterday and the faith she had been raised in, which would ultimately claim her loyalty.
That's it for this episode of Synthetic History. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, help us keep these forgotten voices alive by sharing the podcast on social media and with anyone who loves history told in a new way. You can find Synthetic History on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So be sure to subscribe, leave a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the past alive. See you in the next episode.